Do you think time heals all wounds, or some never close?
You ever had a moment in life that was supposed to be yours, really yours, the kind you wait years for, through heartbreak and doubt, and every damn time you had to clap for someone else while stuffing your own feelings down like cold leftovers? That was my bridal shower. A warm May afternoon, sun sliding through the lace curtains in my mom's living room, a mimosa in one hand and my grandmother's delicate pearl necklace in the other, which I'd just unwrapped from a blue velvet box she'd hidden behind her back. She said she'd been saving it for me since I was 10. People were smiling, teary-eyed even, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was the center of something good. And then Rachel stood up. Late, as usual. In a floral dress tight enough to whisper something, but not say it out loud. Her hair was too perfect, her smile too fixed, and in one smooth motion right as I held the pearls to my neck and everyone turned their heads to see, she clinked her glass with a fork and said those 6 words that would change everything. We just found out, we're pregnant. A gasp rippled through the room like someone had dropped a dish. My Aunt Marilyn actually squealed. My cousin Brittany started clapping. Even Grandma raised an eyebrow, though she said nothing, just sipped her tea and looked over the rim of her cup like someone watching a game they already knew the outcome to. Then, as if remembering the timing, Rachel turned back to me, still glowing like a damn Christmas tree, and added with that half-laugh she uses when she knows she's stepping on toes, "Hope that's okay." And I smiled. I smiled so hard my face hurt, because there were 28 people watching me, and I'd been trained since childhood not to cause a scene, especially not when Rachel was involved. I felt Jake shift next to me. He didn't fake it as well. His brow furrowed and his jaw twitched, but he stayed silent too, maybe because he knew if he opened his mouth, the whole damn day would be ruined. So I laughed a little, said, "Of course," like I meant it, and set the necklace down without putting it on. The rest of the shower blurred. Conversations I wasn't part of. People congratulating Rachel. Someone actually brought her a slice of cake with "Congrats Mama" written in icing. It wasn't until later, when the last guest left and the house was finally quiet, that I let the smile slide off my face like wet paint. I sat at the kitchen island in my mother's house, sipping cold champagne from a solo cup, and Jake just looked at me, then said quietly, "You want to talk about it?" And all I said was, "We're sending out a new save the date in the morning." I don't think he even blinked. Just nodded once and said, "Okay." Now, for anyone on the outside looking in, it probably seems like I overreacted. I mean, babies are beautiful, right? Pregnancy is a miracle. But this wasn't about a baby. This was about Rachel. This was about 30 years of stepping aside while she took the spotlight always. This was about how she cried on my prom night because the boy she liked didn't ask her out, and I spent the night consoling her instead of dancing. About how she wore white to my college graduation and gave a speech at our father's retirement party, like she was the one who'd worked 40 years at the firm. Every time something was mine, she had to slice off a piece for herself, and I let her. But this time, it was supposed to be different. I had worked so hard on that shower. Not just the color palette or the tiny champagne bottles with tags that said "Cheers to Love," but the very idea of creating something for once in my life that was mine alone. No shared credit. No borrowed light. Just mine. And Rachel had waited, oh, she had waited for the perfect moment, right when everyone's attention was on me, to redirect the spotlight like it was a damn reflex. Even our mother had laughed and said, "Oh honey, I had a feeling. That dress was telling on you." She didn't even glance at me. Not even once. I could have said something. I could have pulled her aside and told her off. But Rachel thrives in conflict. She can flip a script faster than anyone I know and come out the hero every time. If I confronted her, she'd cry, say she didn't mean to overshadow anything, that it just slipped out, that she was excited and glowing and hormonal. She'd twist it until I looked petty and she looked fragile. So I did what she didn't expect. I said nothing. I waited. And that night, while she posted a picture of her and her husband kissing on the patio with the caption, "2 celebrations in one weekend. What a blessing." I wrote an email to our wedding planner. I told her the guest list would be changing. That there would be no kids allowed. That invitations needed to go out again. this time, with a note that read, in bold print, "Adults only wedding weekend. No exceptions." I knew Rachel wouldn't call. She'd go silent first. That's her style, retreat until she can find a way to reclaim control. But I was already 2 moves ahead. Because this wasn't just about that day. It wasn't just about pearls or mimosas or attention. It was about drawing a line, finally, after all these years of pretending like we were equal when we weren't. It was about saying no more. Quietly, but permanently. And if that sounds cold, ask yourself this: how many times do you have to be interrupted, overshadowed, or forgotten before you finally stop clapping for the person who always stands in front of you? Because I'll tell you right now, I was done clapping. And Rachel, whether she knew it or not, had just made her last entrance on my stage. The morning after the bridal shower, the sunlight came through our bedroom windows in long, quiet streaks, making everything look cleaner and more peaceful than it really was, the way early morning often tries to lie to you, telling you it's a new day when in fact it's just the next scene in the same damn play. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, rereading the draft of the new save the date like it was a weapon I wasn't quite sure I had the guts to use. Jake had already read it twice, standing shirtless in the kitchen with his coffee, calm but alert, like a soldier who knew a battle was coming and wasn't about to flinch when the first shot was fired. The new card was elegant, subtle, and brutal in all the ways I needed it to be. White text on a deep navy background, classic serif font, no flowers, no ribbons, no love is sweet nonsense. Just the facts. Emma and Jake are getting married. New date, 1 week earlier. New time. Adults only. No exceptions. At the bottom, a quiet note: due to limited seating and the desire for a more intimate experience, we kindly request no children or infants attend the ceremony or reception. That line was Jake's idea, to keep it sounding reasonable. I didn't need it to sound reasonable, I needed it to sound final. Within 48 hours, the emails started. First came the soft ones. Cousins asking politely if their kids were still welcome at the Sunday brunch, or if the rule applied to the rehearsal dinner too. Then came the real ones. My mother called and didn't even say hello. She just launched into it like she'd been rehearsing all night, voice sharp and brittle with false concern as she said, "Emma, honey, is this really necessary? Rachel's due in a few months, and you know travel's hard when you're that far along, especially without the baby once it's born." I cut her off before she could start comparing amniotic fluid to wedding wine. "Mom, she's not due for 4 months. And this isn't about kids. It's about boundaries." There was a pause, long and heavy, the kind mothers use when they're deciding whether to guilt you or pretend they don't understand. She chose both. "Sweetheart," she said, "this feels like retaliation. You're making your sister feel excluded. And, honestly, it's not like she meant to take anything from you. She was just excited. You're both in such joyful seasons, why ruin that?" And there it was. That phrase. Joyful seasons. As if we were characters in a Hallmark movie, gently overlapping in lace and soft piano music. But Rachel didn't overlap. Rachel consumed. And Mom had spent her whole life acting like if we just smiled enough, the fire wouldn't burn. I told her we weren't discussing it further, and when she sighed into the phone like I'd just admitted to lighting the house on fire, I didn't apologize. I ended the call. That alone felt like a quiet revolution. Later that evening, while we were stuffing envelopes, Jake looked over at me and asked, "You sure you want to do this? You know it's going to start something." His tone wasn't hesitant, it was respectful. He wasn't trying to talk me out of it. He just wanted to be sure I knew what was coming. But I didn't answer right away, because part of me wasn't sure what I wanted. Not exactly. Revenge isn't clean. It's not satisfying the way it looks in movies, all fireworks and vindication. It's slow and sticky and often leaves you wondering whether you're protecting yourself or just becoming the person you swore you'd never be. But then I thought back to the look on Rachel's face, the way she timed that announcement with such exact precision, hijacking the room like a magician, pulling the final trick right out of my future. I nodded. Yes, I'm sure. The cards went out. Within 3 days, the silence began. Rachel didn't call. She didn't text. No congratulations, no questions, no snide comments laced with sugar. Nothing. Then, quietly, I noticed she'd unfollowed me on Instagram. Then Facebook. Then she blocked me altogether. Jake noticed it too. Did she just disappear, or did she go nuclear? She went silent, I said. Which means she's preparing something. And I was right. Because the next day, my cousin Sarah, who never misses a chance to be in the know, sent me a screenshot of Rachel's latest Instagram story. A photo of her standing in front of a bathroom mirror in a gauzy white dress, cradling her stomach. The caption read, "Baby number 2 coming soon. Looks like I'll be missing a certain celebration, but this is the real joy anyway." No names. No tags. Just that. That was Rachel's way. Passive-aggressive warfare masked in vanilla frosting and Pinterest fonts. That night, I got a text from Grandma Irene. It said, simply, "Finally. Someone puts her in her place. You need help stirring the pot, call me. I've got wooden spoons older than her excuses." I laughed for the first time in days, a real one that cracked through my ribs and let in some air. I asked Jake if he thought I was being cruel. He didn't even look up from the laptop. "You're not being cruel. You're being clear." And I realized that for the first time in my life, I was doing something Rachel couldn't control. She couldn't spin it. Couldn't reframe it in a way that made me look small. Because it wasn't about punishing her for being pregnant, it was about refusing to let her steal from me what she had no right to take. She had made her announcement. Loud, bold, and uninvited. Now it was my turn. Not loud. Not angry. Just definitive. And this time, no one, not even Rachel, would be allowed to pretend they didn't see it coming. The storm didn't break all at once. It simmered, slow and tight, like water in a kettle that you've forgotten on the stove until the whistle cuts through the silence, like a scream you weren't ready for, and that's exactly how it felt. Because for the first few days after Rachel went silent, there was nothing but that thick, expectant hush that lives in the air before something ugly begins, and everyone who mattered seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see if I'd back down or if this new version of me, the one drawing lines, the one not bending, was going to stick. But I knew better than to trust silence in our family, because in our house, it was never peace. It was just the calm before someone started guilt-tripping you in the name of keeping the peace. It was my mother who broke first, as I knew she would, because she's never been able to stand discomfort unless it's the kind she chooses herself, and sure enough, on the 4th day after the new save the dates went out, she showed up at my apartment without calling, holding a Tupperware container of her lemon bars like a peace offering made of sugar and obligation, and before I could even finish opening the door, she was already sighing the way she does when she thinks I've embarrassed her in front of the extended family. She didn't sit down right away, just stood in the middle of my living room like someone inspecting a space for damage, and then, finally, she said, "I'm going to say this as gently as I can, Emma, because I know tensions are high and you're under a lot of pressure. But I think this decision about Rachel and the wedding, it's not just unkind, it's unnecessary." The way she said it, soft, measured, rehearsed, told me that she'd been practicing those lines, probably with Rachel on the phone, probably with her voice hushed and her tone conspiratorial, and even though she claimed to be gentle, there was a threat underneath it, one that had lived in our family for as long as I could remember. Don't make waves, or you'll be the problem, even if you were the one who was hurt first. I let her talk. I let her go on about how Rachel was going through so much, how pregnancy was hard, how she felt a little blindsided by the save the date, and how family needs to come before pride, and then I asked her one question, just one. I said, "Did you talk to Rachel when she announced her pregnancy at my shower without telling me first?" And my mother hesitated, her mouth opening slightly as if the words were about to come, but then she closed it again and looked away, pretending to notice something on the coffee table, like dust could explain away decades of choosing the louder daughter. "No," she finally said, "but that was different." "How?" I asked, not with anger, not with fire, just with the kind of tired clarity that comes when you've heard the same music your whole life and suddenly realize the lyrics were always a little cruel. My mother didn't answer. She just sighed again, the way she does when she knows she can't win but still wants me to feel like I lost something by not folding. When she left, the lemon bars stayed behind, untouched. By the next morning, the family group chat was an active war zone, thinly veiled as diplomacy. My Aunt Linda posted a passive-aggressive meme about forgiveness being the oil that smooths the engine of family. My cousin James, who hasn't attended a single family event in 5 years, suddenly popped in to say how sad it was to see division during what should be a happy time. And then, finally, Rachel's husband, Derek, decided to chime in with a message that was clearly ghostwritten by my sister, but sent from his phone to preserve her martyr status. He wrote, "We were really hoping to be part of the big day, but with everything going on, it's clear that the door isn't open to us. We're focusing on the baby now. We wish you well, but it's heartbreaking that family can be so conditional." Conditional. That word stung more than I wanted it to, because it hit a nerve I hadn't acknowledged in years, the part of me that still wanted to believe I could be loved without shrinking, without folding myself into the shape of what everyone else needed. Jake saw the message over my shoulder and laughed once, low and without amusement, and then he said, "Do they really think this is about a baby?" "No," I said. "They think it's about them. It always is." And then he did something I didn't expect. He suggested we move the wedding up. Not by much, just 1 week earlier. Just enough to place it inside the window where Rachel's doctor had advised against traveling, a fact she had mentioned in passing at the shower, like a detail she assumed I wouldn't remember. But I had remembered. I remembered everything. At first, I hesitated. Moving the date felt extreme. It felt like crossing a line I hadn't been sure I wanted to draw. But then I realized that the line had already been crossed over and over by everyone who kept telling me to accommodate, to make room, to be bigger, quieter, softer. And I was done shrinking. It was Grandma Irene, as always, who gave me the final push. She came over that weekend with her usual flair, wearing a red blazer and lipstick too bold for church, carrying a bottle of wine in one hand and a folder of old photos in the other, and when I told her what Jake had suggested, she didn't blink. "You can keep bleeding for people who never stop stabbing," she said, pouring herself a generous glass of wine without waiting to be offered anything, "or you can finally put down the knife and let them figure out how to live without cutting you open every damn time." It wasn't a gentle metaphor. It wasn't meant to be. And that's what made it stick. I called the venue the next morning. The earlier date was still available. We moved the wedding. And in that single act, not loud, not public, but deliberate, I knew I had done something I could never undo. But I also knew I'd finally stopped pretending the wound wasn't there. And for the first time in my life, I felt something that wasn't guilt. I felt free. There is something strange and slightly terrifying about the moment you realize you've fully stepped into the version of yourself you were always too afraid to become, the version who doesn't flinch when others raise their voices, who no longer waits to be invited into her own life, who doesn't twist herself into apologies just to make sure someone else doesn't feel discomfort by the sound of her boundaries taking up space. That was me, standing in the living room with the final guest list in my hands, looking down at the names that remained after all the noise had settled and the guilt had burned itself out, realizing that what was left was real and quiet and enough. We had officially moved the date. The venue confirmed it. The florist, slightly annoyed, said she could still accommodate. The photographer had a different wedding scheduled on the new day, but his assistant, a woman with a better eye anyway, in my opinion, was available and more than happy to step in. It all came together with surprising ease, as if the universe had been waiting for me to stop begging for permission and finally choose myself without apology. Rachel found out, as I knew she would, not from me directly. I had already decided there would be no more personal explanations, no more emotional hand-holding for people who made a habit of breaking glass and then expecting me to clean it up barefoot. But through our cousin Haley, who, despite her love of neutral-colored cardigans and being Switzerland in all family matters, had never been able to keep a secret longer than a cup of coffee. The news spread fast. The whispers turned to commentary, and the commentary turned to reactions, but Rachel didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't reach out in any of the normal, human ways. Instead, she responded in the most Rachel way imaginable, a post on social media, glossy and curated, as if pain could be edited into relevance. The photo showed her standing on the balcony of their suburban townhouse, the sun setting behind her like a halo, her hand cradling her belly in the exact way every influencer does when they want you to know they are glowing, blessed, and above whatever small petty drama the world may be conjuring. The caption read, "Some of us have more important things to celebrate than table settings and party favors." Baby number 2 is already teaching us what truly matters. No mention of the wedding. No direct jab. Just a thinly veiled statement soaked in sanctimony, with just enough plausible deniability to ensure that anyone calling it out would look like the villain for assuming too much. I read it once. Then again. Then I laughed, not bitterly, but with something resembling relief, because there it was, her move, her play, her quiet attempt at reclaiming the narrative, and I didn't feel anything. Not rage. Not sadness. Just a clean, cool awareness that I was no longer playing the game she had written. The morning after, as I sat sipping coffee and scanning RSVPs, Grandma Irene called, not to rehash the drama, not to feed the fire, but to ask if I'd opened the wedding gift she had sent early. A small package that had arrived 2 days prior with no return address and only my name written on it in her neat, slanted handwriting. I hadn't yet, so I did as she asked while she stayed on the line, listening with that half-silent breath that let me know she was waiting to see how I'd react. Inside was a photo album. Old-fashioned, with a hard cover and thick pages that smelled faintly of glue and time. On the first page was a handwritten note, "Use this to remember who showed up for you, not who didn't." The next few pages were already filled with photos from the bridal shower, not the awkward, tension-laced moments, but the real ones, the ones my grandmother had insisted on capturing herself with her ancient digital camera. Me laughing with my best friend Amanda. Jake carrying a tray of champagne like a waiter in a tuxedo-themed rom-com. Grandma herself, looking amused and mildly judgmental, wearing sunglasses indoors and giving Rachel's announcement a side-eye I hadn't noticed in real time. It was perfect. And I knew then that whatever happened on the wedding day, it would be mine, not because of who came or didn't come, but because I had finally decided to make it that way. The day of the wedding was smaller than we had planned, streamlined, intimate, stripped of the fluff and excess that had always seemed necessary when we were trying to impress people who didn't actually care. We had 73 guests. No flower girls. No tantrums. No sippy cups or diaper bags tucked under tables. Just adults, friends, chosen family, and a ceremony that felt like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another with clean hands. We didn't include a single seat for Rachel, not out of cruelty, but because she had made it abundantly clear she wasn't coming, and I was done leaving space in my life for people who needed their absence to hurt. When I walked down the aisle, I felt nothing but calm, not joy in the cheesy sense, not butterflies or giddy nerves, but a grounded, rooted sense of having survived something and come out with a spine. Jake cried, just a little, which I'd always suspected he would but never counted on. Grandma Irene wore a black cocktail dress with a string of pearls that matched the one she'd given me, her way of saying that strength didn't always have to dress like softness. After the vows and the dinner and the dancing under soft gold lights, when the guests had started to thin out and the air was thick with the smell of cake and spent roses, I stood on the balcony of the venue and looked out at the vineyard below, wondering, not for the first time, what Rachel was doing at that exact moment. Whether she was scrolling through photos sent to her by lurking relatives, dissecting every frame with the bitterness of someone who had finally found a limit she couldn't charm her way past. And then, as if summoned by that thought, a text lit up my phone. From Rachel. No greeting. No emojis. Just this, "You're unbelievable. I needed you and you iced me out. You're just like Dad." I read it once, then again, and felt the shift, the familiar tug of guilt rising in my chest, conditioned by years of being the one who stayed quiet so others didn't have to feel the weight of their own actions. But then I saw it for what it was, not a plea for understanding, not a gesture of reconciliation, but a weapon disguised as vulnerability. I put the phone down. I didn't reply. Not then. Not yet. Because there's power in silence, too, not the silence of surrender, but the kind that fills the space where you finally stopped apologizing for refusing to be used. And as the music floated out from the dance floor, mixing with the rustle of grapevines in the warm night breeze, I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't wondering what Rachel would do next. Because this time, I had moved first. And she hadn't seen it coming. There's a strange kind of stillness that settles in the days after a wedding, not the quiet of absence or the relief of completion, but something more profound, as if the air itself understands that something has shifted, that the weight of old stories has been lifted off your shoulders and replaced with the unfamiliar silence of a life that no longer bends to the expectations that once tethered you in place. In the week that followed our ceremony, I found myself walking through our home as if seeing it for the first time, noticing how the light fell differently across the floorboards, how the scent of fresh eucalyptus from my bouquet still lingered faintly in the hallway, and how, without quite meaning to, I had created a space for myself where I no longer needed to shrink in order to breathe. Jake, ever intuitive in the quietest of ways, gave me the time I didn't know I needed, leaving coffee for me each morning on the corner of the kitchen table with a note or a single word scrawled beside the mug: strong, worth it, here. He never pressed for a post-mortem of what had happened with Rachel, though I could tell from the way he watched me, from the way he tilted his head slightly when I paused mid-thought or stared too long at my phone, that he was waiting, not out of impatience, but out of love, offering me the grace to speak when I was ready and not a moment sooner. But silence, even the well-intentioned kind, has a way of curdling if left too long, and it was during one such morning, when the rain was tapping against the windows like a restless finger and the house felt too big for just the two of us, that I finally opened the message again, the one Rachel had sent the night of the wedding, the one I had ignored not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much and had grown tired of bleeding for someone who mistook every act of self-preservation as betrayal. You're unbelievable. I needed you, and you iced me out. You're just like Dad. There was so much buried in that sentence that it might as well have been a confession, though I knew better than to believe it was meant as one. It wasn't about seeking truth. It was about punishment, about control, about the last desperate reach of someone who had built her identity around being the gravitational center of every room she entered. But what struck me wasn't the accusation, it was the comparison, the sudden invocation of our father, a man we rarely spoke of unless in hushed tones or with tight smiles. Someone whose absence had shaped our childhoods more profoundly than his presence ever had. I sat with it for a long time, the weight of those words pressing against my chest, until finally I did something I hadn't done since we were teenagers. I wrote back. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I didn't try to make her see something she'd spent her whole life refusing to look at. Instead, I told her the truth, not the theatrical kind meant for dramatic effect, but the raw, quiet kind that feels too plain to be powerful until you say it out loud. Rachel, I wrote, you made your announcement knowing it would take something from me. You didn't ask. You didn't wait. You didn't even hesitate. You stood in front of everyone and chose to shine knowing it would dim my moment, because that's what you've always done. So I took something back. Not to hurt you, not to punish you, but because I finally realized I had the right to. You don't get to rewrite the rules without expecting someone to rewrite the ending. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't watch the screen for those 3 dancing dots. I didn't refresh the thread. I blocked her. Not because I hated her. Not because I wished her harm. But because there comes a moment when self-respect demands more than politeness, when healing requires silence, and when you finally understand that forgiveness is not the same thing as access. The next morning, I placed the photo album from Grandma Irene on the highest shelf in our living room, not out of reach, but out of daily sight, a quiet reminder that memory is something we carry, not something we live in. The final page, which I hadn't noticed before, held a photograph slipped in behind the others without a label. It was a candid of the reception, Jake and I slow dancing under the canopy lights, my eyes closed and his forehead resting against mine, while behind us, in the soft blur of background, sat an empty white chair. It took me a moment to realize what I was seeing. It was the chair we had initially reserved for Rachel, a seat we later left unclaimed, Not because we forgot, but because somewhere deep down, a part of me still wanted to believe she might show up, not for the photo, not for the applause, but for me. She didn't. And maybe that was always the truth waiting to be told, not with anger, but with acceptance. Later that evening, I told Jake about the message, about my response, about the decision to block her. He didn't say much, just pulled me closer, resting his chin on my shoulder, and whispered, "You did what you had to." But it wasn't just about what I had to do. It was about what I finally chose to do. And choices, once made from fear or habit or the desire to please, had finally become mine to own. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about what Rachel had said, "You're just like Dad." I didn't know if she meant it as an insult or a warning or a plea, and I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. Because maybe she was right, but not in the way she intended. Maybe I had inherited his silence, his stubbornness, his need for escape. Or maybe, just maybe, I had inherited his refusal to stay in rooms where he wasn't respected, where love was traded like currency and every boundary was considered a betrayal. The truth is, I don't know who my father really was, and maybe I never will. But I do know this. I am no longer a reflection of anyone else's version of me. I am the final mirror. And if Rachel ever wants to face her own, she'll have to do it without me holding it up for her.